Hello and welcome to Destination Draft Day. I'm Michael Rochman, your host for today's show. Nick Durst will be joining shortly. For everyone that is upset about him not being here, he will be here soon. But we have a jam-packed episode to talk about today. Conference championship games, coaching changes in college football, rookies of the month, because it has been a minute since we have been on the air, and much more and everything in between. First and foremost, we are going to talk about the conference championship games. And, in this graphic that I'm about to pull up, there's one missing. The Conference USA championship game is going to be a tight one, UTSA versus Western Kentucky, in what should be a battle of the ages between two very good teams. Obviously, UTSA has been one to follow all season, but they lost their last game against North Texas, and it kind of dropped the perspective on them as a team. 11-1 now on the season instead of being undefeated. It caused some questions about this team, the legitimacy of their program in terms of what they've been able to accomplish this season. But still, this is a very good team. They are really just led by the overall rushing attack of Sincere McCormick. Frank Harris, the quarterback, has put together a phenomenal year. They have some really good pieces on the defense side. Rashad Wisdom is one that I've heard about in the draft talk consistently. He's a safety that is really just going to be a guy that I think kind of gets more recognition as his time comes, whenever it is that he's in the draft process. I'm not sure on his classification. I believe he could very easily come back for another year. Wouldn't be surprised if he opts to do so. But still, Rashad Wisdom, a name to watch for UTSA in this conference championship game. Western Kentucky on the other side of things. Bailey Zapp is one of the most prolific passers in college football history, putting together a historic season right now with everything that he has been able to accomplish. You can never count out the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. Jareth Stearns is their wide receiver. He is an absolute stud. A little bit smaller than you may be used to. 5'9", 195 is his listed frame. But really, he has just been able to dominate this season. Over 1,500 yards receiving, 12 touchdowns, 127 receptions. He really has been the consistent force in this passing game for Western Kentucky. Bailey Zapp, you can give him all the credit in the world, and he deserves it. But Jareth Stearns is someone that is deserving just as much praise, if not possibly a little bit more, because of what he's been able to accomplish as a wideout for this team. On the defensive side of things, they have some very solid players as well. D'Angelo Malone, 7.5 sacks. Just a guy that has gotten attention because of his production as a pass rusher. Obviously, 2019, he had 11.5 sacks. Last year, he had 6. This year, back at 7.5. Really just a strong season. 6'4", 240-pound senior, probably going to be in the Senior Bowl. I believe he already has accepted his invite. It's another guy that when you're looking at these potential players that are going to be coming into the discussion for day 3, D'Angelo Malone is someone that needs to be considered because he is a very consistent producer at the college football level, and he's most likely going to get that attention that will catch interest of scouts whenever that time comes to start looking at the draft deeper. Then, you'll probably hear more media focus on him as well. So that is the Conference USA Championship game. In my opinion, that one is going to be pretty close. I think, obviously, UTSA is the favorite, but they lost this last game against North Texas. So this is going to be one where it's tough. Oh, wow. So according to the line, Western Kentucky is actually a 3.5-point favorite, which would probably lead me to take UTSA in that game if I were betting on the odds at all. I'd probably just do money line just to see what I can get. But really, it's going to be a close one. Personally, I think UTSA probably losing that game increases my thought that they would win because they're obviously a great team, but sometimes those undefeated teams, they kind of stall out as the season goes along. The mindset of it can really add a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, and I think that's what happened. UTSA beats UNT in a vacuum probably 9 out of 10 times. Probably 10 out of 10, honestly, but because of the circumstances surrounding it, because of everything that happened with just the season, I'm sure the undefeated aspect added a lot of pressure, added a lot of stress to their season, and it led to them kind of stalling out at the end of it and losing to North Texas. I think that loss, though, can kind of shake up things in terms of mindset. It can wake you up as a team, and I expect that to happen for the Conference USA Championship. So give me the Roadrunners to beat the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. And for these remaining 8 games, these were the ones that we were able to get on the graphic. And let's talk about it. Pac-12 plays tonight, 7 p.m. Utah versus Oregon. Obviously, if you've been following the overall college football landscape, you know that Oregon was on their way to potentially making the playoffs after wins against Ohio State. They lost to Stanford, but a lot of people thought, this is still a team worthy of a playoff spot. Then they lost to Utah. They got handled by Utah, 38-7. Now the two meet up in a rematch. 9-3 Utah, 10-2 Oregon Ducks. Utah start out the season 1-2. Since then, they have been one of the hottest teams in the country. Currently, 8-1 winning streak right now. Cameron Rising has came in at quarterback and been absolutely huge. Tavion Thomas is one of my favorite running backs in the college football level. Just a tremendous frame. Really just a dominant runner. 6'2", 221 as a sophomore. He put up 18 touchdowns this year, breaking the Zach Moss held record as a producer in terms of rushing touchdowns. Probably going to hit 1,000 tonight in terms of just overall yardage for the season. He only needs about 22 more yards. This guy really has it all as a runner, and he has really built up steam. Against Oregon, 21 carries, 94 yards. That was less than what he had been doing in these other games. Against UCLA, 160 yards on 24 carries. Against Stanford, 20 carries for 177 yards. Against Colorado, 25 carries, 142 yards. So that Oregon performance, yeah, he put up the touchdowns, but he really didn't have this highlight performance for Tavion Thomas's standards. Still, though, I think that shows his consistency to still put together a very good game against one of the better run defenses in college football. Kayvon Thibodeau, Noah Sewell, it's tough to run on the Ducks, and Tavion Thomas is still going to be an absolute presence in that game. I think this one's going to be closer. I don't think it's going to be a blowout like last time. You're not going to see Utah come in and just control the entire game. But, with the way with the way Utah has really played in these last 9 weeks, going 8-1 in that span, with Cameron Rising at quarterback, I think this is a team that if Rising started the entire season, we could be talking about Utah potentially getting in the playoffs right now. And, that may be something that's easy to dismiss, but right now we're looking at this playoff picture, and there's a lot of unknown, especially if Oklahoma State loses their game against Baylor, then there's just a wide open spot that could really have questions of who fills it. Notre Dame has been rumored, but they lost Cincinnati, a team that hasn't really gotten the respect of the committee despite being undefeated. There's talks about Alabama potentially staying in the picture. There's talks about Ohio State potentially still being able to sneak in. But, if Baylor wins this Big 12 matchup, which we're going to talk about next, Utah would have been in a good spot to potentially be in there. Assuming that with Cameron Rising in at quarterback, the Utah Utes would be able to have beaten BYU, be able to have beaten San Diego State, they'd probably be at 11-1 right now. And with another win against Oregon, I think they'd easily be in the picture. And it would be a situation where we're talking about the Utah Utes as probably that number 3 seed with a chance to go against Michigan, which would be a very good game in my opinion. And, if Utah wins this one, that Rose Bowl matchup against whoever it is that they play is going to be a very good game. So, we already talked about it a little bit, but this Big 12 matchup is absolutely huge for the playoff picture. The assumption is that the SEC winner is locked in, but the loser, if it's Alabama, then there's a wide open playoff spot. And the number 5 seed, Oklahoma State Cowboys, obviously in position to take that if they were to beat a top 10 Baylor squad. Favored in this matchup right now, the odds have it to where they are looking at 5.5 points for the spread. Oklahoma State, obviously a team for so many years that was known as this high-powered passing offense. Spencer Sanders still can reel the ball when necessary, but really a lot of this team's success comes down to Jalen Warren in the running game. The defense is also very strong, one that's probably been one of the most menacing Big 12 defenses than we've seen in recent history. Oklahoma State has a great team, but you can't count out the Baylor Bears because of what they've been able to accomplish. And huge shout out to Dave Aranda, head coach of the Baylor Bears, being able to turn around what was a horrific 2020 season. I believe they went, 2-7 in that span, and now they're back at 10-2 in the Big 12 championship. Just a huge turnaround. Great team. Jerry Bohannon has been absolutely dominant. Obviously there's just a great running attack there as well with both Abram Smith and Tristan Ebner. There is so much talent on this Baylor team. The defense provides so much in terms of just shutdown ability with players like Jalen Petrie, Terrell Bernard, Dylan Doyle. There's pieces all over this defense that Dave Aranda has really put in. Obviously, you can't talk about this team without talking about the nose tackle for this team as well. Siaki Ika is also just another dominant piece. This is going to be a battle of who's going to be more efficient in the run game, which defense is going to step up and slow down the other team. We've seen this matchup before, but it was all the way back in October. Oklahoma State pulled it out with a 24-14 victory. I think it's going to be closer. I think whether or not Oklahoma State or whether or not Baylor wins, I'm not sure. But I do think it's going to be closer. In this matchup, though, I think I'm going with the Baylor Bears. Obviously, Oklahoma State winning would probably be ideal for the committee so they don't have to have the chaos of who gets this final spot. But, man, I like the Baylor Bears. I think their run game is just phenomenal. I think they've improved as the season has went on. Bohannon is a much more efficient passer as the season has gone on. And that's what leads me to think that Dave Aranda and company are going to get this. I don't think Oklahoma State is as good as a playoff team. They have a very good defense, but I think the offense, it's just not as good as I would have expected out of a team that's contending for playoffs. I know Jalen Warren has put together a tremendous season, but there are times where it really looks pedestrian. And for that reason, obviously Baylor has their own issues, but I do think Baylor is going to find a way to slow down this Oklahoma State offense, really turn it into a grudge match. And I'm going to go with Baylor winning this one in what will be a very crucial loss for the Oklahoma State Cowboys. In the next matchup, we got the Mountain West Conference, Utah State versus San Diego State, one that is getting a lot of attention across college football. The 11-1 San Diego State Aztecs potentially could sneak up even higher if they're able to win this game. The big thing about the Aztecs is their defense. They don't really allow a lot of points. Even against Utah, they were able to pull that victory, which now looks even better, despite maybe Utah being a different team with Charlie Brewer at quarterback. On the resume, it just looks like a great win. Obviously, San Diego State had that loss to Fresno State. Jake Haener was able to put up 30 on them, but really all season they have been dominant. The two highest scores they've allowed all season was that 31-point victory still against Utah and then 30 against Fresno State in the loss. There's a lot of talent on this team. There's a lot of capability. There's a lot of capability in this roster that is going to create just absolute havoc for this Utah State offense. And real quick, we got Nick Durst here looking very sharp in his suit. Let me take off this graphic real quick. Nick, looking dapper.
Well, listen, taking care of business here. So sorry I'm late and I can't stay too long. But, Michael, it's great to finally be back and yes, better than ever here. And, wow, it's gonna be a tremendous weekend. Well, it's starting tonight actually with Pac-12 championship game, and then ending Monday with your Patriots taking on the Bills for the battle of first place.
Absolutely, there is going to be a lot of football this weekend that is very crucial for it all. We talked a little bit about the Conference USA game with UTSA Western Kentucky. We talked about Pac-12 Utah versus Oregon. And we were just talking about the Big 12 matchup. That Big 12 one, though, Oklahoma State, if they lose that one, the playoff picture opens wide open. And, you can talk about Notre Dame potentially getting in there, but the committee already has kind of shown their dislike of the fact that Cincinnati undefeated. Maybe they don't view that loss that well because they think, Cincinnati is just a team that hasn't really beaten anyone. So do you think Notre Dame gets in if Oklahoma State loses, or do you think we have to entertain the option of Alabama, Ohio State, someone else?
Maybe Oregon gets in. I think that's if Oregon wins, of course, tonight. But I don't know. Maybe Baylor gets some consideration. I think Notre Dame should get in. But again, are they going to maybe say, we can't do this because their coach is gone? I'm not sure if that would impact them at all.
Yeah, it is certainly going to be a chaotic situation. Real quick, we're going to pull up this playoff picture right now.
Love to see it.
This is what it's looking like with Georgia at the 1, Michigan at the 2. Alabama is really the interesting one because they control their own destiny. I would say Georgia's the only team that's completely locked in. Even if they lose to Alabama, they're still going to be in the 4. But, everyone else is at risk this weekend. Michigan has to beat a very good Iowa team. Alabama has to beat Georgia, probably the most dominant team so far this season. And Cincinnati is, still going against a very good Houston team. And we've seen them kind of have their struggles over the course of the year. We've seen them have their games where they come out flat. And if they come out flat at all against Houston, then they're not going to make it in this playoff picture. There's possibility for chaos in this weekend of college football. What do you think is going to be the play out, though, if you were a betting man on this?
Well, we talked on my show yesterday. I'm right on the halftime app, but I'm worried Michigan might not show up here. I'm wondering, though, Michael. Let's say Alabama wins, Georgia and Alabama are both going to be at Michigan wins. But let's say Cincinnati barely wins and Oklahoma State wins big. I think Cincinnati is going to be out. I think they need to actually win by a huge, huge, huge margin. I personally think Georgia's going to win. So I think if that's the case, I think Alabama should be out. Put in a one-loss Oklahoma State or put in a one-loss Notre Dame. That's what I would do. I don't want to see Ohio State. I don't think they should be in there with their 2 losses. But if Alabama, you're going to keep them in, Alabama has to be the 4 seed, and they have to play Georgia in the first game in the college football playoff. They should not be staying in the 3 seed with a loss if Cincinnati wins. That's the way I would do this. And I think the other scenario to address is if Alabama wins, are they going to go to 1? Probably, but I think Michigan should go to 1.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see it play out. I would think that Alabama would probably go to 1, and then Georgia would fall to 3 in that situation. But there's a lot of potential intrigue there. Going back to these conference championship games, obviously, Appalachian State versus Louisiana is going to be a big one. But we're going to sneak ahead a little bit to Georgia versus Alabama because this is really going to be where all eyes are on this weekend. Alabama, obviously, do-or-die situation, snuck by Auburn, with the weapons they have, Ja'Cory Brooks, John Mechie, Jameson Williams, with the quarterback and Bryce Young that they have. They have Jaleel Billingsley and Latu at tight end. The offense has everything you could want, but they have had their struggles this season. They've had their moments where they've kind of looked pedestrian. Do you think that going against a Georgia defense that has really just been one of the most dominant forces all season, has really just not had any issues handling any offense? I believe the most points they've given up all season is 17 to Tennessee. Do you think that this Alabama offense is going to be able to get going, or do you think there's going to be an exposure of some issues that have been kind of lingering all season?
I think it's going to be tough for them to get going because I think they're going to be playing very tense, a lot of pressure. Saban's probably let them know, like, hey, if we lose this game, we're not guaranteed to be in. So anytime an Alabama team loses 2 games, they're considered a huge disgrace and failure to the program. So they're going to be playing tense, I think, early. They're going to be pressing a bit. I think it's going to be more of the same here when it comes to Georgia's defense.
Yeah, and in this game, Alabama, 6.5-point underdog, over-under set at 49.5. If they are able to get going, then they're going to smash that over-under. But, how much confidence do you have in this offense to really get going? The defense, I think, for both sides, a lot of talent. You look at Georgia, you can talk about Jordan Davis. You can talk about Devontae Wyatt, everyone on that front seven. But there's also just stars in the secondary as well with Lewisine, with Darion Kendrick, with really just anyone on this team. Nakobe Dean is another guy. There's first round, second round, third round guys almost filling out this entire roster. For Alabama, I think the defense definitely isn't the same caliber, but I think there's still plenty of talent and potential for that defense as well. Georgia has their issues as well. Stetson Bennett hasn't really had to be the guy that leads this team up into a high-scoring matchup. We've seen him have his issues, have his struggles as a passer. If this game opens up, do you trust Georgia's offense to keep up with the pace?
I don't think so. But again, it's hard to tell because they haven't been tested this year, Michael. So we don't know what they're going to be like in that situation. But I think we're both in the greens here. I think Georgia's the better team. But again, they're not as battle tested because their side of the SEC is pretty weak. Hoping Oklahoma and Texas go into their side of the SEC, but basically Georgia has an easy cakewalk to the championship game every year, which isn't fair. So it's really hard to get a good grasp.
Absolutely. And in this next matchup, Houston versus Cincinnati, obviously, Cincinnati is in for a heck of a game just in terms of what's at stake. If they lose this game, they're going to be falling out of this playoff picture. No doubt about it. There's no, they're 12-1. We can keep them in. Jerome Ford, Desmond Ridder, Alec Pierce. There's stars all throughout this offense, but the defense is really what gets the attention. Myjai Sanders, the talented cornerback duo of Sauce Gardner and Kobe Bryant. There's stars on this defense. Darian Beavers is another guy. But Houston has their pieces as well that's going to really kind of create a really good game in this matchup. Houston has Clayton Tune at quarterback, who really has had his turnover issues, but he's someone that I think really could put together strong games at any moment. He has a nice arm, has some nice talent. McCaskill's a very good running back. Nathaniel Bell is going to be the focus of this game. If he can get going, whether he's matching up with Sauce Gardner or with Kobe Bryant, then he's going to, kind of keep this offense open, kind of keep the capabilities of what it's able to do. And Houston could surprise in this matchup. On the defense side, they don't really have one star. There's guys like Logan Hall that are probably going to be draft prospects, but it's a very spread out attack in terms of pressure. It's a very spread out attack in terms of the secondary. Marcus Jones is a very good corner for them. Kind of a smaller guy, maybe won't be able to go against a Josh Wiley or an Alec Pierce, but still be able to have his impact. Nick, a lot of people are talking about this playoff scenario where we think of, probably Michigan wins, probably Cincy wins. What happens when most likely Alabama loses, who gets in? Well, I guess the big question is what happens if Cincinnati blows this and now there's two open spots?
Yeah, if Cincinnati blows it, Michael, I think Alabama locks up a spot if they lose. I think they'll get it at the 4. At least I hope. Again, I don't want to see Alabama get rewarded by not having to play Georgia again next game. But yeah, if Cincinnati blows it, I would think Oklahoma State or Notre Dame are going to get in there, but maybe Oklahoma State because they have a great opportunity to put on a show this weekend and kind of leave a lasting impression in the college football playoff committee because obviously Notre Dame is not in the conference. They won't be playing again.
Now, do you think for Notre Dame, we'll talk a little bit more about Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly soon, but with the loss of the head coach, do you think that they're going to see that come into play with the ranking, or do you think the committee is still very much going to focus on the performances so far this season?
I unfortunately think that is going to come into play, which is not fair for the assistant coaches, not fair for the players in the program. So I think it's just not great the way the college football shakes out. And I think there needs to be some sort of revision here to when coaches can be hired, because, if you got a chance to win a national title and you're leaving your program, it's not a good look. So I do think that if Oklahoma State wins, again, they're 11-1, they're the 5 right now, they would get in over Notre Dame.
Absolutely agree with you. This next matchup, maybe not as much playoff implication, but still should be a very good game. 10-2 Wake Forest versus 10-2 Pitt. Pitt, obviously, with Kenny Pickett, a guy that could very easily be the winner of the Heisman Trophy. Wake Forest, Sam Hartman, very good quarterback as well. This is two teams that really kind of overachieved in terms of expectations. They really shattered what people were thinking. A lot of people thought this game was going to be Clemson versus North Carolina. Pittsburgh and Wake Forest, though, put together great seasons, put together dominant plays, some big victories. Wake Forest obviously having wins over North Carolina State, which was huge for them, beating Florida State, another big game that a lot of people maybe didn't expect. Pittsburgh had a win against Clemson, wins against Tennessee, even beat North Carolina. They had their slip-ups. They lost to Western Michigan, which may ultimately be the reason they aren't in consideration for playoff talk. But now, Pittsburgh, Wake Forest, who do you got in this game, and what do you want to see out of Kenny Pickett to potentially solidify his chance at the Heisman?
Yeah, I want to see him throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think that gets it done there for sure. Wake Forest was a great story all year long, whereas Pittsburgh kind of like flew under the radar and now they're here. But very evenly matched teams here, the 17th and 18th in the rankings. And I think Clemson will be back in this game next year. I'm going to lean – I think I'll lean Pittsburgh just because I think, there's a lot at stake here for the quarterback. But again, on the other side, Hartman has had a great year at quarterback as well for Wake Forest.
Absolutely. This is going to be a very interesting matchup. I think the weapons for both teams are also worth noting. Jordan Addison, dominant receiver for the Panthers. Wake Forest has like a plethora of weapons that could really get involved in this game. You talk about A.T. Perry, who's really just put together a tremendous season, Ja'Cory Roberson. And then there's guys that really kind of flew under the radar on the defensive side. But Rondell Bothroyd really put together a tremendous season with 7 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. I think this is going to be a good one. I think I kind of lean Wake Forest, but Pittsburgh is a very good team that has a lot of capabilities with their offense. Kenny Pickett is a very good college quarterback. I've kind of made it known that I'm not as similarly high on him as others when it comes to the draft process, but still, as a college QB, he's been absolutely phenomenal and could
best Pittsburgh QB since Dan Marino.
Absolutely. Now, in this last matchup, one that you've highly regarded as potential upset watch, Michigan versus Iowa. Michigan with the tremendous defense, great running game. Iowa with their history of just being this really kind of scary opponent regardless of what they're doing any season. Questions about the passing offense, but still a very good, well-rounded team, great defensive play. Tell me why you're worried about Michigan in this one, Nick. Let's hear it.
I mean, they're the better team, but you're coming off such an emotional high, which was the win last week at the Big House in the snow versus your bitter rival Ohio State, who in your time at the program, any player there, more of the coaching staff, has never beaten Ohio State. Maybe you're not going to come out as focused here in this game because, I mean, Iowa's a good team. So if you're not 100%, then there's a great chance that you could slip up. And I think the fact of the matter is that, this is going to be a tricky one. But I do think Michigan is going to win.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a close one. That 11-point favorite doesn't sit right with me. I think Iowa is going to keep it close, but still, ultimately, I think Michigan wins this one, solidifies themselves as the 2 seed, and really kind of opens up the door of being a legitimate contender. That's the conference championship preview for this week. Obviously, a great weekend of football starts tonight with the Conference USA and Pac-12 championship games. Keep an eye on it. Real quick, before Nick leaves, we're going to talk about Rochman's Rookies of the Month.
Oh, yeah.
A storied tradition that you guys have been robbed of for these past few weeks. It starts with Mac Jones, 76 for 99, 854 yards, 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Patriots have really kind of flung themselves up from what seemed to be a middling team to now a potential contender. Mac Jones has been huge in that aspect. Obviously, the defense is the main reason, but Mac Jones has guided the ship as best as possible. Nick, what do you think of this Patriots team? And do you think they're a legitimate contender, or do you think it's just a good regular season?
I need to see what they do Monday against the Bills in Buffalo, right? So if the Bills win, then I think the Bills are going to be the front runners here. But if the Patriots come out and do what they've been doing, they might not lose the game again this season, the regular season at least. So I think that the Patriots could be legit, but Monday's going to be a big indicator on how it's going to go the rest of the season.
Absolutely. Next up is Elijah Moore, 22 receptions, 315 yards, 4 touchdowns. Did it with the backup quarterbacks. Zach Wilson comes back. He really isn't as productive. Maybe Elijah Moore, he's not liking Zach Wilson. Needs Joe Flacco,
maybe.
needs Josh Johnson. Zach
he
Wilson,
wants Mike back.
I think Zach Wilson has shown some promise, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Next guy is Panay Sewell, 0 sacks allowed over the course of November, moved around from left tackle to right tackle, and just played phenomenally. Offense tackle that really had issues in preseason. People were ready to kind of write him off, show their issues, but he's a stud and he's going to continue growing. He's very young and he has so much potential. Next guy is Jalen Phillips, 12 tackles, 5 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, and 8 quarterback hits. Brian Flores went out and got this guy. He knew he needed a defensive playmaker. Phillips able to do that, and he really had a tremendous game against Carolina with 3 sacks. And the last guy to talk about, probably one of the biggest superstars in college or in NFL, probably an all-pro despite being a rookie. That's Micah Parsons, 25 tackles, 6.5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, 12 quarterback hits, and 2 forced fumbles. Nick, I know you got to go soon, but real quick, what are your thoughts on Micah Parsons, and is this locked up for Defensive Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, is he going to win Defensive Player of the Year too? I think it's in the cards.
There's an argument. Absolutely,
very
he might
impressive.
Be competing with his own teammate.
Look, they got rid of Smith, who was as highly touted as him because he was better. So maybe he stays healthy. The Cowboys have always been incredible with the linebackers, but it's a matter of health. Sean Lee was constantly getting injured, but I think the Giants messed up not trying to get him or Sewell with their first round pick, and now you got Daniel Jones out with a stiff neck, and so we didn't even talk about the fact that the Seahawks stink, and maybe Russell Wilson's going to be a Giant next year with those 2 first-round picks the Giants have.
Yeah, there's a lot on the table for the Giants to potentially do. Rumors of a new GM, rumors of potentially another offensive coordinator coming in. Jason Garrett getting fired, so you assume so. There's a lot of options. This offseason is going to be interesting for the Giants. They are kind of strapped for cash, but I think you need to make a major swing.
They're going to have a new GM, so we'll see. But I'll speak to you next week. Thank you, everybody.
Absolutely. Take care. And, other than that, though, there isn't a lot to discuss. We'll talk about this weekend's games coming up for the NFL, and then we'll get out of here. But, first and foremost, talk about that Cowboys game last night. The Cowboys weren't great, but I think, pulling any win when you can is absolutely worth it in the end, obviously. But I think this is a huge sign of, just how good the Saints could be if they were able to have a healthy quarterback. Alvin Kamara even being healthy would probably swing that game the other way. Saints, probably a year where they just have to take the L. They've lost 5 in a row. They'll probably bounce back against the Jets, lose to the Bucks. I think they lose to the Dolphins, beat the Panthers, beat the Falcons. So they're sitting at about 9-8, but I don't know if that's enough to really – or no, that'd be 8-9. So potential to get in there with the way the playoff picture looks, but they need a healthy quarterback in order to do that. Taysom Hill, even with the finger injury, I think he showed enough to not be that guy that's going to really lead them to the playoffs. Some big games this weekend. Bengals Chargers. I got the Bengals in that one. They've just come out consistently, whereas the Chargers seem to kind of fall flat against good teams. They've kind of lost momentum, the Chargers, whereas the Bengals have won 2 in a row. I don't know what the deal is with the Chargers. I feel like the talent is there. The defensive line obviously is horrendous when it comes to stopping the run, but I feel like the talent on this roster is there for where the Chargers should be way better, but it just isn't happening. They need some run defenders, whether it's getting a Jordan Davis in the draft or just spending those second, third round picks on guys. It's a crucial need when you have guys like Joey Bosa that are already dominant defensive linemen. You need to give them other supporting members. And right now, Jerry Tillery was a guy that was very highly touted as a prospect. I liked him too, but he's just getting moved in the run game, and he just gets taken off his base extremely easily, and it just creates a ability to drain the clock all game. And when you're a guy like Brandon Staley, where you have this defensive mindset, it's embarrassing. Other games to watch, I think, would have to be the Ravens versus Steelers. In that one, I got the Ravens. I think the Steelers are a pretender of a team. They've lost their last 2. They tied against the Lions. But really, I just think that when it comes to these big games, the Steelers kind of get shown that they are very one-dimensional. They're a running team with a strong defense. And obviously, you can say the same about the Ravens, but the Ravens can open things up. Whereas the Steelers, if Ben Roethlisberger tries to throw over 20 yards, it's a lob. It's a rainbow ball. And that's just not going to work when it comes to opening up this offense. If you fill the box, you're slowing down the Steelers, holding them to like 20 points tops. So there's just not a lot to do if you're the Steelers, and that's going to lead to issues, especially a team like the Ravens that they have to go up against. In the last game, we'll talk about Chiefs versus Broncos. I got the Chiefs in that one. I think they're kind of getting going. I think it's a legitimate team that you have to watch out for when it comes to Super Bowl contention now. The AFC really is wide open. I'd say the entire NFL is wide open for who's going to be in the Super Bowl. Chiefs won 4 in a row, beating teams like the Packers, obviously without Aaron Rodgers, but they still beat the Raiders by quite a hefty margin. They held the Cowboys to 9 points. Now, they play 3 games against the AFC West, and if they win those 3, then they could absolutely control it. That's 3 wins added on. They'd be sitting at 10-4. Right now, they're already in the lead by a game. If they're knocking everyone down to at least 6-6, right? Because obviously, at best they'd be 8-6. That's a 2-game lead at least, and that's assuming that they just all these teams go 2-1, only losing to the Chiefs, and that's not going to happen. I mean, some of these teams are going to blow some games. I think the Chargers lose to the Bengals. I think the Broncos probably blow it to the Bengals as well, and then the Raiders are one of those teams that it's so hard to predict because it seems like they have an easy game and then they blow it, and then they have a tough game and they really show out and win. So they probably lose to Washington and then beat Cleveland, even though you kind of expect the opposite. So Chiefs are in a prime position to really kind of control this playoff picture and potentially even get that top spot despite having a flat season in terms of what the expectation was. Right now, AFC top seed is the 8-3 Baltimore Ravens. Chiefs just 1 game behind them right now at 7-4 despite their slow starts. So lots to watch in this NFL weekend, lots to watch in college football, and lots to watch for the NFL draft aspect of it all. And there's no better place to hear about that than here at Destination Draft Day. It's a long road to the NFL draft, but we'll get you there. For Nick Durst and myself, Michael Rochman, we appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll see you hopefully on Monday. Take care.